3-year relationship with the defendant and hoped to prove upside down when she had an internet fling and ended up pregnant. Another man is her baby's father. You're ending your relationship for good.
Shut the door behind her, and I had overheard the word pregnant. I said, we are pregnant right now? And she said no, she had denied it.
Of conception, we were both seeing other people, and it might not be your baby.
She was like, of course it's yours. I haven't been with nobody else.
You were totally lying about that, because I told you from the get-go that it might not be your baby. Before you started cheating and started all the cheating in the relationship.
That's where you're wrong at, because I didn't start cheating. This beautiful little girl was coming. She wasn't even all the way into the world yet. Her eyes were open, and I was like, hi, and she screamed for the first time. It was the sweetest noise I've ever heard in my life.
Awesome. So I can imagine the connection was established.
Inside Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the atmosphere carries a weight that comes from years of unresolved doubts, emotional fractures, and the unspoken fears that hover between partners who no longer trust the story of their own past. The case opens with a young mother arriving with the urgency of someone who believes her relationship can still be saved if the evidence lands in her favor. She presents herself as a woman fighting not only for her child's future, but for the fragile bond she has already nearly lost. The defendant stands across from her, carrying the exhaustion of betrayal, the emotional residue of unanswered questions, and the cold logic of a man who believes the only way to reclaim control of his life is through a scientific answer, an answer found only in the DNA results he demanded. Judge Lauren Lake immediately recognizes what surrounds her, a couple who has come to court not just for a test but for closure. The courtroom observes a familiar tension, one that mirrors countless relationship breakdowns that emerge in the podcast world of DNA test people regret taking, cheating stories, and the game-changing attorney podcast, where law, emotion, and irreversible decisions collide. But this is no podcast episode. This is a courtroom where the consequences are formal, traceable, and binding. The stakes do not fade after the recording ends. They follow the individual's home. The mother begins by explaining that she is here to prove the biological connection between the defendant and her child. She insists she told him early on that there was a possibility another man was involved. But she also claims she was transparent once she learned the extent of the timeline. Her voice carries an emotional restraint, and although she appears defensive, there is an unmistakable sincerity in her desire to protect her child from instability. She fears the end of a 3-year relationship, a reality that hovers just behind every sentence she speaks. The father responds with a harsher tone, built not from aggression but from deep disappointment. He recounts how he learned about the pregnancy, first as an overheard conversation, then through a direct confrontation. He explains how confusion turned into heartbreak when he discovered she had been involved with someone else at the same time. His retelling is not embellished. It is clinical, almost analytical, as though he is reliving every fact the way an attorney might present evidence to support an adverse inference in Evidence Act dispute. He uses the logic of dates, timelines, behaviors, and patterns, all in an effort to justify the wall he is now forced to build around his emotions. Judge Lauren Lake listens intently, not simply absorbing the facts but tracing the emotional lines that run between them. She does not need dramatic outbursts to understand the gravity. The pauses and the subtle hesitations reveal enough. She guides the testimony with the precision of someone well-versed in the relationship between law and justice, a topic often discussed in jurisprudence, yet here she encounters it unfolding in real time, messy, human, unfiltered. The mother attempts to provide clarity through evidence. She presents a calendar outlining the exact window of conception. The dates show overlapping encounters with 2 different men, both unprotected. She does not hide this reality. Instead, she states it plainly, as if acknowledging it is the only way to move forward. Her honesty is imperfect, but it is still honesty. Her admission shifts the courtroom atmosphere. Even the audience appears momentarily disarmed by the openness of her statement. The father, though, reacts physically, shoulders tightening, gaze hardening. This is the moment where he realizes that the uncertainty he has lived with may have been avoidable. His doubt is not hypothetical anymore. It is documented on paper. Judge Lake recognizes the emotional impact and slows the pace, allowing him to process what he sees. Her experience echoes the themes heard on the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where revealing the truth is both a release and a wound. The mother then adds another layer of evidence. She explains that the child has blue eyes, while both she and the defendant have brown eyes. The other potential father, she notes, has blue eyes. She brings forward a picture, not to incriminate the defendant nor to redirect blame, but to illustrate why doubt has also lived inside her. She wants the court to see that she, too, has spent months trapped between two possibilities. The father analyzes the photo with visible discomfort. He admits that blue eyes do not run in his family and reluctantly acknowledges that this physical trait raises doubt. This moment is less about genetics and more about the emotional fracture it represents. It becomes clear to Judge Lauren Lake that this couple does not simply fear the results, they fear what the truth will demand from them afterward. The judge turns her attention to the core relationship. She asks each party if they wish to remain together. The father hesitates, admitting he is unsure. The mother mirrors the uncertainty, explaining that she feels mistreated, unsupported, and frequently disrespected. The judge understands that behind these answers lies a pattern common in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where couples attempt to rebuild after betrayal but struggle under the weight of old wounds. As she listens, Judge Lake is also aware of the broader legal landscape. Cases like this inevitably touch discussions heard in the Divorce Course podcast, where individuals attempt to separate emotional damage from legal obligation. Here, too, she sees that distinction. The father's emotional turmoil does not negate his potential legal responsibility, and the mother's previous behavior does not determine biological truth. This is the courtroom where law sharpens its edges against human imperfection. What complicates the narrative further is the mother's admission that the second possible father is no longer reachable. She explains that when she reconciled with the defendant, she cut off communication with the other man entirely. This detail casts a shadow on any possible future search for answers if the defendant is excluded. Judge Lake registers the significance. She knows that unresolved paternity creates lifelong identity gaps, similar to those found in some adoption stories, full episodes where adults search for biological connections long after childhood. The courtroom grows still as the judge signals for the envelope containing the DNA results. Everyone understands that the next few moments will redefine the legal, emotional, and personal structure of this family. The father braces himself, visibly torn between hope and fear. The mother holds her breath, desperate for stability, but aware that the evidence may not favor her. Judge Lauren Lake reads the results. The father is confirmed as the biological parent. The courtroom erupts in quiet relief, a release of tension accumulated through months of suspicion and conflict. The father expresses joy, pride, and emotional vulnerability, a moment that contrasts sharply with his earlier guarded demeanor. He proclaims the child as his own without hesitation, his voice cracking under the weight of relief. The mother's expression softens, a mixture of gratitude and vindication. She sees in the father's reaction a glimmer of possibility, perhaps even reconciliation. But the judge knows that biology does not erase emotional wounds. She acknowledges their relief, yet reminds them that the truth is only the first step toward healing. The results resolve the legal question but not the relational one. Judge Lake closes the hearing with measured compassion, guiding the couple toward healthier communication and greater responsibility. Her words reflect the judicial balance between empathy and clarity. She understands the concept of justice in jurisprudence is not only about identifying biological truth, but also about preserving the child's emotional well-being in the aftermath. As the first case concludes, the courtroom prepares for the next, another individual seeking clarity after decades of believing a father was dead. The air shifts. Another story is about to unfold. Even after Judge Lauren Lake announces the DNA result confirming the defendant as the biological father, the courtroom does not immediately settle into calm. The emotional release created by the result is powerful but incomplete. It reveals the truth, yet it also exposes the fractured history between the couple, fractures that scientific confirmation cannot automatically heal. What follows is a quiet shift in the courtroom atmosphere, almost like the settling dust after a building has been shaken from the inside. The father, though relieved, is still visibly processing the months of uncertainty he lived through. The way he stands, the tightness in his shoulders, and the heaviness in his breathing show that this is not a simple victory for him. It is a confirmation that validates his emotional turmoil. The courtroom sees a man who poured himself into raising a child under the shadow of doubt, and now that doubt has been lifted, he is confronting just how deeply it affected him. Judge Lake notices this as she studies his expression. She sees that, although he is proud, the emotional residue of mistrust still clings to his posture. The mother stands across from him with a mixture of relief and vulnerability. She understands that the result has restored something fundamental, yet she also knows that her past decisions, the overlapping timelines, and the introduction of a second potential father have left scars that a single moment of truth cannot erase. Her relief is tangled with regret, a quiet reminder of how easily a relationship can unravel when communication falters and emotional insecurity drives decisions. Judge Lauren Lake watches both individuals carefully, recognizing the dynamic as one she has witnessed in countless cases, moments where the truth changes everything, but not always in the clean, orderly way people expect. She is aware that in the world of DNA test people regret taking, many individuals arrive hoping the answers will solve their problems instantly, yet the truth often complicates the aftermath. Even when the result aligns with hope, it brings new responsibilities, new expectations, and the unavoidable need to confront what happened before the truth arrived. The judge does not question the accuracy of the result, but she does question the emotional readiness of both parties to move forward. She knows that biology will not erase the arguments that tore them apart, the accusations of cheating, the mistrust born of secrecy, or the hurt caused by the mother's contact with another potential father. Her courtroom becomes not only a place of legal resolution, but also a space where emotional accountability must be faced. She brings the same mindset often explored on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where personal responsibility and truth are viewed as the foundation for rebuilding any form of partnership. As the courtroom moment unfolds further, the mother's earlier statements gain new meaning. She had explained that she told the defendant about the possibility of another father early on, and she had insisted she did not hide the truth. But her sincerity is intertwined with regret. She knows that even if she shared the information honestly, her actions still forced the father into emotional limbo. She understands that the truth about overlapping relationships is not something a partner can easily digest, especially when they were building a family together. Yet she also knows that acknowledging her past decisions is the only way to rebuild trust. The father continues to absorb what has been confirmed, He reflects on the emotional journey that began the moment he overheard the word pregnant months earlier. He had once envisioned a stable future, a family with a child he believed was truly his. Then uncertainty entered like a quiet fracture, widening each time new information emerged. Now, with the truth officially recognized, he grapples with the dual reality that the child he bonded with is legally and biologically his, while the woman standing before him is the same person who disrupted that certainty. Judge Lake draws attention to the responsibility that follows the result. She reminds the couple that a DNA confirmation solidifies legal obligations, defines rights, and protects the child's future. Her emphasis carries the legal clarity heard in discussions about child support, evidence rules, and the adverse inference in evidence act, though she explains these principles through calm, human-centered guidance rather than cold legal terminology. She recognizes that their situation reflects the wider conversation about the relationship between law and justice, where the law delivers facts, but justice depends on how people choose to respond to those facts. The mother, encouraged by the result, begins to consider what reconciliation might look like. She imagines the possibility of rebuilding a functioning family, but she also understands that the father's trust has been deeply damaged. She carries more than just the relief of the result. She carries the awareness that her actions contributed to a long cycle of conflict. She recognizes the emotional cost he paid, and though she hopes he will stay, she knows she cannot expect instant forgiveness. Her perspective resembles the tone heard in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals acknowledge past mistakes but hold on to hope for a healthier future. The father, however, remains uncertain about the relationship. Though he has claimed his child with full emotional force, he does not immediately claim the relationship. The judge sees the separation forming between his role as a father and his role as a partner. His identity as a father is secure now, strengthened by scientific proof, but his identity as a partner still feels compromised. He knows that biology cannot rewrite the timeline of doubts, arguments, and emotional withdrawal. He wants to be present for the child, but he is unsure whether he can trust the mother again without reshaping the entire structure of their relationship. Judge Lake approaches the matter with her characteristic blend of firmness and empathy. She acknowledges that the truth has clarified one issue, but not the entire future of the relationship. She underscores the need for communication, responsibility, and emotional maturity, principles often emphasized in the Divorce Course podcast, where individuals struggle to separate personal grievances from their responsibilities to their children. Judge Lake guides both parties toward confronting the emotional damage openly, instead of burying it under the relief of the moment. The mother listens closely, her posture softening. She internalizes the judge's assessment, knowing that accountability must accompany relief. As she stands there, she is reminded of the many families who appear in similar situations from her uploaded case file. Individuals who navigate uncertainty, who hope the truth will stabilize their lives but must still address the deeper wounds that remain. The father, too, absorbs everything. He recognizes that emotional healing will require patience, honesty, and a willingness to address past mistakes without using them as ammunition. He considers what it would mean to rebuild the relationship, what boundaries would need to change, and what new behaviors would be required. He knows that the result has given him clarity as a father, but he must now decide whether he is ready to accept the emotional risks of staying in the relationship. Judge Lake concludes the moment by guiding both parents back to their core responsibility, the child. She reminds them that paternity is not merely a biological determination. It's a lifelong commitment that extends far beyond the courtroom. Her final thoughts echo themes found in jurisprudential reflections, emphasizing that while the law identifies facts, true justice comes from how parents uphold their duties in the real world after the facts are known. As the couple exits the courtroom, the judge watches them with a sense of cautious optimism. She has seen many cases where the truth caused division, but she has also seen truth create pathways to healing. She understands that for this couple, the DNA result is not an ending. It is the beginning of a new chapter defined by responsibility, honesty, and the difficult work of rebuilding trust. The case does not fade from memory as the courtroom transitions to its next file. Instead, the emotional imprint of this case lingers, a reminder of how fragile relationships become under the weight of doubt, and how powerful the truth can be when finally revealed. As the courtroom clears from the initial wave of emotion, Judge Lauren Lake remains focused on what still needs to be resolved beneath the surface of the now settled biological question. The DNA test has delivered certainty, but certainty is not the same as stability. In paternity disputes, especially those involving overlapping relationships, lost timelines, and strained trust, the truth often lands heavier than expected. That weight now sits across both parents, shaping the next phase of their responsibility. The father lingers in the courtroom moment longer than necessary, as though trying to reconcile the relief he feels with the conflict he still carries inside. His love for the child is no longer shadowed by doubt, yet the emotional memory of those months remains. He remembers the day he first heard the word pregnant behind a closed door, the uncomfortable conversations that followed, the inconsistent statements that created suspicion, and the uneasy feeling that he might be investing in a child who was not biologically his. Now that the truth confirms his paternity, he feels a surge of emotional connection, but the scars of uncertainty remain. Judge Lake, trained to recognize both legal and psychological patterns, understands that his internal conflict mirrors stories often dissected in the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where individuals must reconcile hard truths with raw emotional history. The mother watches him closely, unsure what conclusions he will draw now that the scientific proof is final. She sees the relief in his body language, but she also senses the guardedness that remains. She remembers how deeply he bonded with their child, how he was present in the hospital, how he cradled the newborn before she was fully in the world, how he cared for her daily despite the storm of suspicions. She knows that biology only confirms what he already felt, yet she also recognizes that her decisions before and during early pregnancy have altered his trust in permanent ways. Judge Lauren Lake turns her attention back to the record of the case. The timeline presented earlier, complete with the mother's calendar, the absence of contraceptive protection, and the admission of involvement with two men during the same window, remains a critical backdrop to all emotional fallout. The judge has witnessed hundreds of similar cases where relationships deteriorate not because of the truth, but because of the long period of uncertainty leading up to it. She reflects briefly on how the father's emotional journey has been shaped by the possibility of adverse outcomes, and how the adverse inference in evidence act concept, where doubt grows in the absence of clear information, felt silently present in the courtroom. At the same time, she notices that the mother is not without her own emotional burdens. Her earlier comments reveal a woman who fears abandonment, who grew up without knowing her own biological father, and who desperately wants her child to avoid repeating her experience. The judge recognizes the familiar internal conflict. The mother's fear of losing her partner intersects with her desire to preserve a stable family structure. This duality is common in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals admit to unhealthy choices while simultaneously trying to build healthier futures. The courtroom now holds a moment of pause as Judge Lake transitions from the determination of facts to the acknowledgement of what comes next. In paternity cases, especially those as emotionally charged as this one, the legal truth is only the beginning. The judge must address not only the responsibilities outlined by the law, but also the emotional landscape that threatens the future of this family if left unexamined. She begins by reasserting the legal implications of the confirmed paternal relationship. The father, now legally recognized, carries obligations that extend beyond the courtroom. The responsibility to provide support, stability, and presence, standards reflected in cases argued before the Supreme Court and echoed in legal commentary about child support responsibilities. But Judge Lake frames these obligations not as burdens, but as foundational aspects of parenting. She explains that legal fatherhood is one part, but consistent emotional fatherhood is another, an expectation that he has already met even while doubts lingered. The mother listens with a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. She understands that the legal clarity benefits her child, but she also senses the judge's subtle reminder that stability requires more than DNA. It requires accountability, maturity, and honest communication. She confronts silently the reality that she must now rebuild trust, not just celebrate the confirmation. Her previous choices, documented clearly in the calendar and acknowledged before the court, must become lessons rather than repeated patterns. As these reflections settle, the courtroom transitions into an introspective space. Judge Lake, with her years of experience, often notes how paternity courtrooms reveal the deeper societal questions embedded in the relationship between law and justice. This case, like many featured across podcasts such as the Game-Changing Attorney podcast and the Divorce Course podcast, showcases how emotional decisions intersect with legal consequences. She recognizes that justice is not simply deciding whether someone is a parent. It is ensuring that the truth supports the child's welfare, even when that truth disrupts adult comfort. The father remains conflicted. His relief is anchored in love for the child, but a deeper question remains unanswered. What happens now between him and the mother? The judge sees this uncertainty on his face. She has observed countless couples arrive with the hope that DNA results will automatically repair emotional ruptures, but the reality is more complex. The truth may anchor responsibility, but it does not dissolve betrayal. It does not erase arguments, nor does it rewrite the late nights spent questioning loyalties. It cannot restore trust on its own. Yet despite his pain, the father feels a renewed sense of purpose. He knows that whatever relationship he chooses to maintain or leave behind, he is committed to remaining present in his child's life. This clarity brings a new calm to him. He begins to steady his breathing, no longer weighed down by the fear of emotional investment leading to legal entanglement. Instead, he feels strengthened by his role as a confirmed parent. He experiences the shift often described in personal stories from adoption stories' full episodes, where identity becomes clearer once biological truth is established. The mother watches this transformation with conflicting emotions. She hopes this clarity will open the door to reconciliation, yet she fears that it may instead give him the strength to walk away from the romantic relationship entirely. She knows she cannot control his choice, so she begins to consider what co-parenting would look like if he chooses distance over partnership. She understands that her main focus must be the child, not the status of their relationship. Judge Lauren Lake then offers a final set of reflections intended to anchor both individuals in the reality of what comes next. She emphasizes the importance of cooperation, honesty, and emotional availability, values often advocated in legal commentary and family justice literature. She highlights the need for both parents to learn from the past rather than weaponize it, a principle that reflects the broader concept of justice in jurisprudence, where truth must be used responsibly. The judge is careful not to impose expectations about reconciliation. Instead, she guides them toward understanding that the outcome of their relationship, whether together or separate, must prioritize the child's stability above all else. She reminds them that children sense emotional tension, absorb parental conflict, and are shaped by the choices adults make long after the courtroom lights dim. Her words carry a gravity shaped by years of witnessing how unresolved bitterness can harm a child more deeply than any DNA uncertainty. As the mother wipes away the last traces of fear from her expression, and the father squares his shoulders with new conviction, an unspoken understanding forms between them. They both know this day will follow them, into their home, into their routines, into every decision they make moving forward. The DNA confirmation is not a conclusion, it is a starting point. Judge Lauren Lake finally closes the session with the kind of firm compassion that defines her courtroom. She acknowledges the pain, the relief, the uncertainty, and the responsibility. She reminds them that truth is powerful but requires emotional maturity to use correctly. She signals that her role for this case is complete, yet the real work now begins outside these walls. As the parents exit the courtroom, their paths diverge in subtle ways. The father walks with the reassurance of identity finally restored. The mother walks with the knowledge that she must rebuild trust piece by piece, and both walk carrying the shared responsibility to use this truth for their child's benefit. The courtroom prepares for its next case, but the echo of this one lingers, a reminder that truth, once revealed, does not simply settle facts. It reshapes futures.